Let's talk about Alien Romulus. Romulus is the sixth film in the Alien franchise, but technically the ninth if we're considering Prometheus and the two Alien vs. Predator films, and we can even consider it the 10th installment if we want to be brazen and add the 2014 Alien Isolation game in the mix, since it is heavily canon to the franchise's lore. I asked my friends and peers what they think, and there is a 50-50 split as to whether Alien vs. Predator is a part of the lore and the franchise. I don't really know myself if they're meant to be separate or not, but they do certainly incorporate a lot of the Alien lore and the intellectual property, so why not? But let me know in the comments what you guys think, and let's get into Romulus itself. So it's a 2024 horror sci-fi that's meant to be set in 2142, which is between Alien and the sequel timeline-wise, although I'm pretty sure there's a new alien introduced that resembles a mixture of the xenomorphs and the engineers or pilot extraterrestrials we see in Prometheus. Romulus is about an orphaned young woman and her brother who join a bunch of other aspiring space colonists on a journey elsewhere, and unfortunately, the ship they're on is harboring Big Chap and a bunch of other xenomorphs. And I'll be honest, Romulus was pretty impressive. I did read a lot of reviews where others disparage and talk about the pacing being too fast and there not being many climactic moments, but I honestly disagree with those opinions. In Romulus, the acting is good, the story itself is pretty solid, the xenomorphs are smart and scary as hell, and there's probably only one or two plot holes that I could identify. There's also a lot of homage paid to the original films with the perfect amount of exposition where if you've never watched any of the previous Alien films, the plot is still accessible and you can still enjoy the ride. One shot that had me absolutely hooked was when Navarro used a futuristic X-ray light to see what's thumping in her chest after facing off with the facehuggers, and it was a real "ah shit, here we go" moment, okay?
Ah, shit. Here we go again. Worst place in the world.
Now, the name Romulus carries a lot of meaning in Roman mythology, and to give you some brief context that you may or may not care about, Roman mythology states that the city of Rome was founded by a pair of twins named Romulus and Remus, and in Roman folklore, the two were raised by wolves. Romulus was considered a good leader by many of his followers, but as was Hitler, and Romulus also harbored a dark side, which is evident through actions that consisted of abducting women from neighboring towns to marry off to Roman men, and primarily for betraying and murdering his brother to reign over Rome. No biggie. And maybe this is the English major in me, but I found the title of this alien iteration to be very intentional. In the film, the lab aboard the Renaissance space station is called Romulus. But why? Of all the things you could name something, why Romulus? Well, I'll tell you why. As mentioned before, there are a pair of siblings on the ship named Rain and Andy, and their relationship plays a pivotal role in the lives of other characters as well as the story itself. And when I say siblings, I mean it as if my TV were my brother, because while Rain and Andy have a sibling dynamic, one of them is an android and the other is a human. And very briefly on the topic of franchises, feel free to skip this part if you want. My understanding of why we're typically drawn to franchised films is because we get to re-immerse ourselves in a world that we're already familiar with and that we can trust to be entertaining and high quality, as they typically come from a strong foundation. This can be said for Harry Potter, the Star Wars franchise, excluding nearly everything after Revenge of the Sith, and even the Twilight franchise, which is corny and borderline satirical but comes from a place of familiarity, which is something we're always drawn to, even beyond the context of films, right? Anywho, I would consider giving Romulus a watch not only to re-immerse yourself in that adventure and spine-chilling world, but because it is a pretty solid film even as a standalone, that certainly is worth your money. And for me, there's nothing worse than spending your hard-earned money and giving your time and unfettered attention to a film that does not deliver. But I can assure you, Romulus delivers, ships, and returns, okay? And if that's not enough for you, here are 5 reasons to watch Romulus. 1. To experience an expansion of the pre-existing alien lore. 2. For Cailee Spaeny, because she's giving Ripley 2.0 but with a touch of tenderness and vulnerability that we didn't always get from Ripley. 3. In recognition and appreciation for practical effects in filmmaking and maybe even its superiority to CGI. 4. For educational purposes of what to do if you're stuck in space with creatures that are more clever and have greater physical prowess than you. And 5. for a good time, because Alien not only incorporates many different genres into one film, but also many different horror subgenres as well, which you don't often see. It is monster, psychological, science fiction, and body horror all rolled into one, and I really do love body horror, so it checks off my preferences and most importantly my expectations in a film. So again, I would highly recommend giving it a watch. Now, with all the Alien films in circulation, where does Romulus belong in the ranking of best to worst? I'll tell you guys society's ranking versus my own personal ranking, and if you guys have your own ranking, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. First, let's start with society's ranking. Alien and Aliens are interchangeable in their rankings here. At number 1 is Alien, the original founding father of the franchise, released in 1979 and directed by Ridley motherfucking Scott. It sits comfortably at 93% on Rotten Tomatoes and 8.5 on IMDb, while Aliens, the sequel, sits at number 2. It was released in 1986, written and directed by our Canadian treasure James Cameron, and is considered the champion of the franchise in most cases, since it sits at 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is higher than Alien, but also has an 8.4 rating on IMDb, so there's some controversy there for sure. Coming in hot at number 3 is the topic at hand, Romulus. It's directed by Fede Álvarez and produced by Ridley Scott, and is currently sitting at 82% on Rotten Tomatoes and 7.5 on IMDb. At number 4, we've got Prometheus, released in 2012, and again directed by Mr. Scott, with a pretty sexy cast if you ask me. It sits at 73% on Rotten Tomatoes and 7 out of 10 on IMDb. At number 5, we've got Alien Covenant, released in 2017, again directed by Ridley. It sits at 65% on Rotten Tomatoes and 6.4 on IMDb. Now, from here on out, the ranking gets real fucking ugly, okay? At unholy number 6, we've got the 1997 Alien Resurrection, directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. I don't know who this is. The cast is nice, but not nice enough for society, because it sits at 55% on Rotten Tomatoes and 6.2 on IMDb. At number 7, we've got the 1992 Alien 3, which was directed by our beloved David Fincher. And I have to ask, what was David Fincher doing? I think maybe he had some bills due, he needed rent money, because this was no passion project for him at all. Every one of his films slap except for Alien 3, but I decided to put the blame on Vincent Ward, who created the story. Alien 3 has a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes and a 6.4 on IMDb, which is on par with Alien Covenant's IMDb rating, but because the Rotten Tomatoes score is so low, it's ranked where it's ranked. At number 8, we've got Alien vs. Predator, which came out in 2004 and was directed by Mr. Resident Evil, Paul W.S. Anderson. As ambitious as crossovers get, Alien vs. Predator sits at a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes and 5.7 on IMDb, which is pretty bad. And coming in last, we've got the 2007 sequel to Alien vs. Predator, Alien vs. Predator Requiem, which for some really ugly, stupid reason is stylized as AVPR, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. And I've never seen the acronym included in the title of something alongside the full title, so on that basis alone, it rightfully deserves its last place ranking, and AVPR sits at 12% on Rotten Tomatoes and 4.6 on IMDb, which is as brutal as it gets. My personal ranking of the Alien franchise is the OG Alien at number 1, because let's put some respect on its name, shall we? On a 5-star scale, I give Alien 4 out of 5 stars for ingenuity and Sigourney Weaver's epic portrayal of Ellen Ripley. Aliens, the sequel, comes in at number 2, which I rate about 3.5 out of 5 stars. At number 3, we've got Romulus, which for me just booted Prometheus down to 4. I rate Romulus somewhere between 3 to 3.5 stars because it was thrilling, honestly a very solid film. At number 4, we've got Prometheus, which, if I didn't respect the alien lore so much, would be at number 1 because I really love this film. It is so visually stunning and it really does expand the alien universe a lot more. Also, the lore and its implication with the Greek mythological figure Prometheus is something that's always interested me about this film. And for those of you who don't know, Prometheus was a god of fire who defied the other gods by gifting fire to man alongside technology and other craftsmanship, and he was punished by Zeus for all eternity by being bound to chains and having eagles eat his regenerating liver every day, which is very Jesus coded, if you ask me. Also, we've got Michael Fassbender being a weirdo android, which was also super entertaining. Similar to Romulus, I give Prometheus 3 out of 5 stars. At number 5, we've got Alien 3, which I rate 2.5 stars. For starters, I do like the story a lot, and in some ways, it's a lot scarier than the other Alien films because although Ripley's not trapped on a space station anymore, there's weapon limitations and accessibility issues and evil people as well, which make it all the more difficult for Ripley to face off with the xenomorphs. And spoiler alert, if you haven't watched Alien 3 yet, Ripley's final girl streak technically ends here because she sacrifices herself by fire after the xenomorphs impregnate her, and to also prevent Weyland-Yutani from using the xenomorph offspring as a biological weapon, which is pretty badass considering everything she's been through to survive up until this point. But you know what they say, you either die a hero or live long enough to become a villain. At number 6, we've got Alien Resurrection, which I also give 2.5 stars to. This rating is mostly grounded in Sigourney Weaver's return as the Ripley 8 clone. In Alien Resurrection, the story definitely gets a lot weaker, but it's still pretty interesting, especially with the Ripley clone's DNA being fused with the Queen Xenomorph's DNA. This twist of events definitely puts a nice, fresh spin on the entire lore, as well as when it comes to the idea of cloning and the integrity of identity. Integrity of identity is something I just made up, so I don't know if it makes sense. Moving forward, at number 7, we've got Alien Covenant, which I rate a solid 2 out of 5 stars. I love Ridley Scott, but this one was a bit weak. And the whole deal with David, the android, wanting to play God was cool, but there are about 20 plot holes going on, and it's unfortunate that the film was not well made because David's transition from the helpful, subservient deuteragonist to the father of evil creatures that we see in Covenant was interesting and almost added some substance to the lore, but ultimately ended up being a silly mess. At number 8, we've got Alien vs. Predator, which I give 1.5 stars to when I'm being rational, but in my silly little heart and soul, I almost want to give it 2 to 3 stars because it's such an epic crossover that was just poorly delivered. It also doesn't add anything much to the lore other than servicing fan curiosity about whether the xenomorphs could face off against the Yautja predators, and that in itself should have been a strong enough foundation for success, but instead we got a hot steaming pile of poo. And lastly, we've got AVPR, which is an even hotter steaming pile of poo that I generously give 1 stars and maybe 1.5 on a good day. Again, the concept is pretty cool with the 2 alien species bringing their beef to Earth, which is just hilarious because even if one of them won, humans lose either way, although they might have a better chance of befriending the predators. Anywho, the cinematography and camera work is terrible, the story has too many shortcomings, the dialogue is just whack as fuck, and they really just made a mess of the 2 franchises. This is how my ranking compares against society's ranking. And most of the franchise can be watched on Disney+, so if you are looking for something cool to watch, I'd consider everything from Alien to Alien Resurrection, plus Romulus. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'm just a girl making silly little videos, and I appreciate the time you spent watching this. I would greatly appreciate a like and maybe even a subscription if you're feeling generous. And to the people who do watch these videos of mine, please know that I really do enjoy making this content. A word which I hate, but that's what it is, and would like to continue doing so as I begin my master's program this upcoming September, where it will be hard to juggle side projects like this, but obviously some level of support is sought after to make videos like this and eventually of a higher caliber, so please keep that in mind. I am hoping to get to 100 subscribers by the year's end, so if you like my videos or have any suggestions of future topics you'd like to see covered, let me know. I'm also curious curious about what your guys' favorite film franchises are and whether you resonate more with my ranking or society's ranking, which, to be frank, are not that different, right? Anyhow, thanks again for watching. Cheers. Bye, bye, bye. Oh my god, I'm so tired.